So we're starting a new little series on hope today, and we begin by reading these words out of the book of Hebrews in the New Testament. When God made his promise to Abraham, since there was no one greater for him to swear by, he swore to himself, saying, I will surely bless you and give you many descendants. And so after waiting patiently, Abraham received what was promised. People swear by someone greater than themselves, and the oath confirms what is said and puts an end to all argument. Because God wanted to make the unchanging nature of his purpose very clear to the heirs of what was promised, he confirmed it with an oath. God did this so that by two unchangeable things in which it is impossible for God to lie, we who have fled to take hold of the hope set before us may be greatly encouraged. We have this hope as an anchor for the soul, firm and secure. It enters the inner sanctuary behind the curtain where our forerunner, Jesus, has entered on our behalf. He has become a high priest forever in the order of Melchizedek. The word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. Well, for some folks, it's nothing more than a delusion. An emotion that has no real connection to reality. It's simply the sort of wishful thinking of cockeyed optimists like Nellie Forbush. Some of you will remember her from Rodgers and Hammerstein's classic musical, South Pacific, based upon Michener's novel. Nellie is a naive U.S. Navy nurse from Little Rock, Arkansas, who falls in love during World War II with a middle-aged French plantation owner, Émile Debec. And in one of the signature songs of that musical, Nellie reassures Émile that despite all of the chaos around them, the war going on, everything's going to be okay because, in her words as she sings it, she's stuck like a dope with a thing called hope, and she can't get it out of her heart. For others, like the English poet Lord Byron, hope is nothing more than the paint on the face of existence. The least touch of truth rubs it off. And then we see what a hollow-cheeked harlot we've got hold of. In the words of another playwright, Jean Kerr, hope is simply the feeling you have that the feeling you have isn't permanent. We can all probably relate to that at some level. We live in what, despite all of our prosperity, some have called an age of despair. Much of the news this past week centered around the suicide of disgraced billionaire Jeffrey Epstein, faced with horrendous charges that finally caught up with him. Epstein is said to have taken his own life while in a federal jail up in New York. But he wouldn't have been alone in that reaction, would he? 2017, there are estimated 1,400,000 attempted suicides in this country. 47,000 of them ended up with the person dying. Suicide is the 10th leading cause of death in America. And according to one expert at Harvard Medical School, the rampant increase in depression, with 1 in 6 Americans needing medication for it, is because Harvard Medical School, we live in an overly secular society that doesn't even pretend to have spiritual values anymore. All of which has left many in this age of angst asking, is there more? Is there more? But had you asked that question centuries ago to the author of the book of Hebrews, he would have replied not only yes, he would have told you to challenge you to consider what hope really is for whoever he was, and we don't really know who wrote Hebrews. Some say Barnabas, others are not sure. Whoever he was, it's clear that he was passionate about helping Christians of his day find a strong, vibrant faith. He drew rather brilliantly on the Greek translation of the Old Testament, as well as on philosophy and on Jewish traditions. And his goal was to convince his readers not just to maintain their faith, but to marvel in their faith. To that end, in speaking about hope, he used this rather powerful metaphor, saying hope is the anchor of the soul, both secure and sure. Now, the word for anchor in Greek is the word adkura. It comes from a term referring to a bent arm, bent as in ready to receive a burden, maybe a little bit like the shape of an anchor. And the word for steadfast or secure, ababayan, means to walk where it is solid. Tells us three things about hope this morning. First, that hope is not hype. And second, that hope is external. And third, that hope is eternal. Let's see if we can unpack those a little bit. We're starting this sermon series on abounding in hope. And that little phrase, by the way, is what I hope can become a watchword for our congregation in the season ahead. Because in this age of angst and despair for so many, in this age of anger for so many, we need to be a dispensary for hope, if you would. We ought to be clear, though, hope is not the same as hype. There's a lot of that this morning, too. We live in a ridiculously hyped up time. Certainly in the world of politics, contentiousness has superseded civility and even conversation. And outrage has become the default response to everything. Have you noticed how many people are just angry all the time? And if anyone dares to say anything publicly, whatever it is, someone else is going to immediately fact check them. And then if there's anything even slightly exaggerated, God help preachers, or a rant in their claims, they're going to attack them for trying to mislead and lie to other people. There is no more benefit of the doubt in the body politic. And sometimes not even in the church. But isn't that the inevitable end game? If you abandon the idea of truth, you let everybody proceed not just on the basis of their own opinions, but on the basis of their own facts, whether they're objectively correct or not. Perception sometimes is reality, and governments, no less than individuals, know that. As the specter of World War II loomed closer and closer in England, the British government commissioned a series of posters to distribute all around the country to try to keep all the morale up. They used all capital letters in a distinct typeface, simple two-color format, the only graphic being the crown of King George VI. The first poster was distributed in September 1939, and it said simply, "Your courage, your cheerfulness, your resolution will bring us victory." About 6 months later, a second poster came out, and it read, "Freedom is in peril. Defend it with all your might." These two posters were everywhere, on the sides of railroad platforms, in pubs, in stores, in restaurants. There was a third poster that was created, however, just in case of extremes, in case of an invasion by Germany. It was never distributed. They printed more than 2.5 million copies of it, but no one ever saw them until 60 years later, when a bookstore owner in northern England discovered one in a box of old books he'd purchased at an auction. He opened it up, and it read simply, "Keep calm and carry on." The bookstore owner framed that poster, put it up in his shop, and some people liked it, so he started printing copies of it. And soon it became popular, and it was everywhere, not just on posters, but on postcards, on coffee mugs, on T-shirts, all across the internet. This word from the past that had never been spoken in the past was a great reminder. We don't even need to panic in an age of angst. But the truth is, it was just hype as well, wasn't it? Well-meaning, maybe even a little inspirational. It certainly wasn't founded in anything other than an appeal to one's inner resolve to keep that fabled British upper lip. But in contrast, the writer of Hebrews tells us. Genuine hope is not hype, and it's not internal to us. It's external. That is to say, it's not something you and I can manufacture and drag up out of ourselves. It's something tied to a reality that is beyond us, the promises of God. Our hope is securely anchored by a sacred oath from God, who has sworn to himself in the inner sanctuary behind the curtain, that is the Holy of Holies. You know that place in ancient days. Only one man, the high priest, should enter it on one day of the year, the Day of Atonement, because God was said to reside in the Holy of Holies, first in the tabernacle, then in the temple. That's where hope comes from. See, an anchor, it's a great metaphor. It can be defined in several ways. Most of us know it as that piece of metal that is attached to a ship or a boat by a cable, and then it's cast overboard, and it's supposed to hold the vessel in place because of its hooks, which dig into the surface of the floor of the ocean. Different types of anchors. A flute anchor. It's a little like a spade or a hoe to me. Not sure how it works. A grapnel anchor has 4 hooks on the bottom of it. And a mushroom anchor looks like a mushroom. The most familiar, though, is that anchor that has a ring on the top and a stalk or a handle, and then a shank going down to an arm that has 2 bills, two flutes that are designed to dig into the sand. But however an anchor may look, the one thing that is consistent is that it's almost always hidden. The sailors cannot see the sands in which it is fixed some 50 or 60 feet below. They just know that it is. Because when the wind comes, the ship doesn't move. An anchor is outside the ship because anything that steadies us cannot be a part of ourselves, has to exist beyond us. Now let's be clear, an anchor is no good until it's attached to something with a strong chain. All the promises of God gives us are not unless we attach ourselves to them by setting our hopes there. But our hope is not simply our self-manufactured, cockeyed optimism. It's founded in the reality of our Creator. Thomas Aquinas put it this way. He said that the anchor of hope fixes the soul firmly in God in this world, which is kind of like a sea, because there is no stability in this present life in which the soul may find security and rest other than in God. And the reformer John Calvin echoed that sentiment. He wrote, "Our hope rises and floats aloft because it finds nothing to stand on in this world. It cannot rely on created things. It finds rest in God alone." You say, "Oh, but can I really trust God?" For there have been times in the past which I felt left down by him. I prayed for somebody to get well, and they died. I asked for help in a very difficult hour, and it didn't seem to be forthcoming. I trusted somebody else with my heart, and they trampled on it and then left. I get that. Nobody gets through this world without some disappointment and some heartache. But the promises of God that he swore by his own name, since he could swear by no greater one, are true even when they don't fit our timetables. God promised Abraham, for instance, though he was 80 years old and childless, that his descendants would be as numerous as the stars, and he would have a child through whom not only his family but all the families of earth would one day be blessed. But old Abraham had to wait 25 more years to see the birth of that promised son. That kind of patience is in relatively short supply for most of us. We live in an instant credit, get everything now economy. We don't grow trees in our yards. We buy them already potted and maybe a couple feet high. Or we move to a house that already has trees. Waiting is not in our style. patience is not exactly our forte, is it? But here's the truth. Promises demand patience. And God is more interested in growing us than he is in giving us everything that we want right now. To express it in a different way, God has a purpose for putting us in waiting rooms sometimes. You've been there. And that's so because in the end, hope is not just external, hope is eternal. God promised it before time began, so Titus tells us. Hope doesn't just see the present with all of its challenges. It looks forward in joyful, confident expectation to the eternal salvation that awaits all who live in Christ. See, there's another definition to that word anchor, at least in the English language. It refers to the last person in a relay race. That person is usually the most reliable one on the team. The one whom, after everybody else has done his or her best, you can depend on that person to help the team win. I'll just tell you that in school, I was never the anchor of any relay team. But Jesus is. He is for each of us. In relational terms, he is the one whom we can turn to emotionally when we're in times of distress. If somebody says to us, I will be your anchor, what that means is that they will do their best to help us succeed, to stay afloat, even to survive. That's what hope can do for us. In the first few centuries of the Christian faith, the symbol of our faith wasn't a cross. It was an anchor. You can see it carved in here in the catacombs. Michael Card has observed, if you were a first century Christian and you were hiding in the catacombs in Rome and 3 of your best friends had just been thrown to the lions or burned at the stake for their faith, the symbol that would encourage you the most in your faith would be an anchor. To remind you that Jesus is your anchor in the storms of life as well. That's why I love the photo that we're using on the sermon series. It's on the cover of the bulletin as well. I have the original one hanging in my office. It was taken by a young man named Lance Henderson, who was a part of the previous church where I served. Lance was a little bit shy. He was about 15 years old. He didn't participate in a lot of the youth program. He wasn't quite sure he liked the youth program or liked the youth or liked the pastors or the church. I'm not sure where he took it. It does not appear to be Galveston to me. I don't know about you. But I know why he took it. Because Lance was looking for an anchor in his life. Something to hold him. He found it in Jesus. The same Jesus whom this writer of Hebrews will go on to tell us in chapter 13 is the same yesterday and today, that is from sunrise to sunset, and forever, that is aeon in Greek. We get our word eons from that. For all the eras, for all the eons, for all the ages yet to come. So I ask you this morning, have you found that kind of hope in your life, my friends? Or are you just drifting along? Being blown by all the winds of change while life seems to be shifting beneath your feet? If so, I have some really good news for you today. Some news for you about the future. And it is that hope wins. You can carve it in granite, you can etch it on stone, you can shout it from the housetops if you like, because nothing in this world is sure. Hope wins. So when your kids ask you about the future, teach them to sing those old words. This is my Father's world. Oh, let me never forget that though the wrongs seem oft so strong, God is the ruler yet. So may hope become the anchor of your soul. It is firm. It is secure. Amen.